pistol was close enough that Bruce Lee could see the dust settled in the grooves of its slide. 18 inches, maybe less. A soldier twice his size held it there, one-handed, barrel aimed at the bridge of his nose, grinning like he'd just told the funniest joke of the deployment. Behind them, half a dozen men in full plate carriers stood in a loose arc, laughing so hard one of them had his hand on his knee. The base's golden hour light turned everything amber, and the shadows stretched long across the packed dirt. No one was filming, no one was intervening, and the soldier with the pistol had just said 5 words that 6 seconds from now he would spend the rest of his career trying to forget. The base sits 47 miles from the nearest town, though calling it a town requires generosity. Fort Ridley exists in a pocket of high desert that the Army carved out in 1967, decommissioned twice, and reopened both times when budget lines shifted and someone in Washington remembered it was still there. By 1970, it operates as a transitional training facility, a waypoint for units cycling between stateside rotation and overseas deployment. The kind of place where the architecture apologizes for itself. Plywood barracks under corrugated roofing that pops and ticks in the heat. A motor pool where diesel has soaked so deep into the concrete pad that the smell persists even in January, even after rain, even when no vehicles have run for days. 2 concrete structures anchor the center of the base. One serves as a medical station. The other is a briefing hall that doubles as the only indoor space large enough for equipment demonstrations and the kind of mandatory assemblies that soldiers attend with their eyes half closed. Between them, the parade ground spreads out in packed red dirt, the kind that turns to powder when the wind picks up and to something close to clay when it rains. It has not rained in 6 weeks. The surface holds boot prints from this morning's drill like a cast, each impression sharp enough to read the tread pattern. Summers warp the metal siding on the Quonset huts along the eastern perimeter. Winters bring a dry cold that sits in the bones, because the afternoons still reach 80 degrees and nobody layers properly. But late afternoon is when Ridley loosens. Formal drills are at by 1,500 most days, and the gap between the end of training and the mess hall opening at 17:30 fills itself with whatever the men can find. Card games on overturned crates near the motor pool. Equipment maintenance performed at a speed designed to kill time rather than accomplish results. And sparring, informal, unsanctioned, tolerated by the NCOs as long as nothing expensive breaks and nobody ends up in the medical station with a story that requires paperwork. The sparring has its own economy. Fort Ridley carries a disproportionate number of men who boxed amateur circuits before enlisting. A handful wrestled in college. The base's unofficial hierarchy, the one that actually determines who earns deference in the barracks after hours, runs on a different currency than rank. Names carry weight, or they do not. The distinction is settled on the dirt, not on paper. The invitation that brings Bruce Lee to this particular base on this particular afternoon has travelled through military liaison channels for 3 weeks. A combative arts exhibition, the paperwork allocates 90 minutes and describes it in language so bureaucratic that most of the men who read the briefing notice treat it as a scheduling footnote, a break from routine, a curiosity at best. Lee arrives alone, 40 minutes early, in a rented Chevelle that looks conspicuous among the olive-drab vehicles along the base perimeter. He carries a single canvas bag. The gate guard checks his credentials, notes civilian status, waves him through with the particular disinterest of a man who processes 60 entries a day and has stopped seeing faces. What the gate guard does not record, because no form exists for it, is the cluster of 7 soldiers already gathered at the far edge of the parade ground. They are not waiting for the demonstration. They have been waiting since 3 days ago, when word first reached the barracks that a movie martial artist was coming to teach them how to fight. The distinction between those 2 kinds of waiting is the distance between attending an event and planning one. The late sun catches the dust above the parade ground and holds it there, suspended in amber light that turns the air itself into something visible. Somewhere near the motor pool, a radio plays at low volume, a song no one present will remember afterward, though the static between stations will stay with at least 2 of them for reasons they cannot explain. Lee crosses the parade ground at a pace that belongs to neither the nervous civilians who walk too fast on military bases, nor the overwhelmed ones who drift too slow. His stride covers ground without announcing itself, Steady, unhurried, calibrated to something internal that has nothing to do with the heat or the stairs. The light blue button-up hangs untucked over dark slacks. The sleeves are rolled twice to just below each elbow. His shoes are flat-soled, thin enough that the packed dirt telegraphs through them with every step, and he walks as though he is reading the ground through his feet rather than merely standing on it. A private named Reyes notices him from the motor pool. Not the walk, not the clothes. What catches Reyes is the way Lee sets down the canvas bag near the briefing hall entrance. The bag does not drop, does not get placed with care. It simply leaves his hand at the exact height where it meets the ground without bouncing, a release so calibrated that the absence of correction is itself the thing worth noticing. No one introduces themselves. Lee stands near the entrance and looks out across the parade ground with an attention that does not scan. He is not measuring the field's dimensions. Something about the surface holds him. One foot presses into the dirt, shifts, registers. Then he walks to the center of the open ground and stops. For 4 minutes he does nothing that would read as significant to a casual observer. A single neck roll. His right hand opens fully, fingers extended, then closes at a speed that is wrong. Not fast. The opposite. The fingers decelerate through the last quarter of the motion, as though each tendon answers to a separate instruction, each one completing its own private negotiation before arriving at rest. Reyes looks a second time. The light catches the hand differently on the return, and the slowness of it makes the air around the fingers feel heavier than it should. The men near the vehicle yard have been watching since the Chevelle parked. A card game has stalled mid-hand. No one walks over. There is nothing to respond to. A man standing motionless on a dirt field should be the simplest thing in the world to ignore. But the cards remain face down on the crate, and the hand that was reaching for a bet has stopped mid-air, and nobody seems to notice that they have all been looking at the same point for longer than makes sense. An NCO near the barracks entrance will describe it differently when asked about it weeks later. He says it was not that Lee was doing nothing, it was that the nothing had a specific density to it, like watching a man hold a door open that he could release at any moment, and understanding, without being told, that the door is heavier than it looks. The parade ground radio has gone to static. Nobody adjusts it. Dale Maddox has been at Fort Ridley for 9 months. 29 years old, 6'2", 231 pounds at his last weigh-in. His neck requires the base tailor to let out his uniform collars, a modification he has never mentioned to anyone but that registers immediately on every person who stands within arm's reach. His hands are large, even for his frame, thick across the palm, the kind that make a standard-issue canteen look undersized. The left one carries a knuckle that sits slightly out of alignment, a fracture he set himself in the field 2 years ago rather than report to medical and risk the paperwork that would have followed. His record is not reputation, it is documentation. 2 years of competitive boxing at Fort Bragg before the transfer, a regional armed forces middleweight title he has since outgrown by 15 pounds, the belt stored somewhere in a footlocker he does not open. Informal matches at 3 separate postings, none lost, several concluded early enough that the men who witnessed them cannot agree on what they saw. At Ridley, Maddox does not occupy the top of the hierarchy so much as he defines the scale by which everyone else measures themselves. If Maddox acknowledges that a man can fight, the barracks accepts it as fact. If he does not, no amount of evidence presented by anyone else carries weight. The way he moves through space tells a story he never narrates. His walk covers distance in straight lines, not theatrical, not aggressive, direct. When he rounds a corner, his shoulders and hips rotate as a single unit. No drift between them, no wasted oscillation. The way he lowers himself onto a mess hall bench, controlled descent, no drop, the motion governed by trunk strength that has long since passed from conscious effort into structural habit, reveals more about his physical education than his service record does. Everything about his body is load-bearing. Even his stillness has a particular architecture to it, the way a bridge looks motionless but is always distributing weight. His assessment of martial arts is not second-hand. 2 years prior, he attended a judo demonstration at Fort Bragg and left at the halfway point. The corporal who accompanied him said Maddox was not dismissive, he was bored. The distinction matters. Dismissal implies engagement followed by rejection. Boredom implies that engagement never occurred. The demonstration had failed to register on whatever internal instrument Maddox uses to evaluate whether something deserves his full attention. When the briefing notice about Bruce Lee's visit circulates through the barracks, Maddox reads it, folds the paper once along its centre crease, and sets it on the table without comment. The corporal sitting across from him asks if he plans to attend. "I'll be there." 3 words, no emphasis on any of them, but the sentence travels through the unit within hours, carried by the particular current that moves through military housing when the men sense that something unscheduled is about to happen. Not a threat, not a plan exactly, a weight placed on one side of a scale, and the shared understanding that the other side has not yet been loaded. What Maddox carries into that expectation, and what no one in the barracks has access to, is the framework through which he evaluates another man's capacity. The inputs are specific, and they are physical. Weight, reach, visible musculature, stance mechanics, how a man holds his hands when he believes he is not being observed. Maddox has refined this framework across hundreds of encounters, and it has produced reliable outputs every time. By its metrics, the man on the parade ground measures small, 5'7", perhaps 140 pounds, wrists that Maddox could close his entire hand around with room to spare. The framework is rigorous. It has never failed him. This is not arrogance. It is the confidence of a system that has been tested under pressure and has always returned accurate results. So when Maddox tells 3 men from his squad to walk with him to the parade ground before the scheduled demonstration begins, the decision does not register as recklessness. It registers as precision. He is applying the same instrument he has always applied, and the instrument is telling him what it has always told him about men built the way Lee is built. The instrument has no category for what it is about to encounter, but the absence of a category does not produce a warning. It produces nothing at all. The reading comes back clean, and Maddox trusts clean readings. He has built a career on them. Specialist Torres walks at Maddox's 4 o'clock as the group moves toward the open ground. Torres has served under Maddox for 5 months and has learned to read the man's gait the way a helmsman reads a current, not by what it does, but by what it deviates from. And during this walk, Torres catches something he has no frame for. Maddox's pace adjusts, not faster, not slower, but with a hitch so slight it might be a trick of the uneven ground. As if some rhythm ahead of them had reached out and brushed against his stride, and he had caught himself matching it before he understood what he was doing. Torres files this away, says nothing. The parade ground opens before them, flat and amber in the dropping light, and the man at its centre has not turned around. By the time Maddox's group reaches the edge of the parade ground, 4 more men have followed, close enough to be part of whatever is forming, far enough to deny involvement if a senior officer asks. The semicircle assembles without instruction, without discussion, the geometry of it emerging from years of squad movement drilled into muscle memory, until the body arranges itself without consulting the mind. 7 men in full tactical plate carriers, tan molar pouches catching the last of the afternoon light, standing in a loose arc that faces the centre of the field the way an audience faces a stage it did not pay to enter. Rifles are racked for the afternoon. Sidearms are a different matter. Maddox wears his M1911 in a hip holster, standard carry for NCOs during transitional hours on a base where the commanding officer has loosened firearm regulations on the theory that visible weapons maintain order. The holster sits high on his right hip, the grip angled forward, the leather darkened at the contact points from 9 months of daily wear. Nobody questions it. The pistol is as much a part of Maddox's silhouette as the width of his shoulders. Lee has not turned to face them. PFC Linda Vasquez watches from the south entrance of the briefing hall. She arrived early. The official reason involves folding chairs that need to be arranged inside for the demonstration. The unofficial reason is that she studied Wing Chun for 2 semesters at a community college in San Jose before enlisting, and the name printed on the briefing notice carries a weight for her that it does not carry for anyone else on this base. She stands in the doorframe with a metal chair gripped in each hand and has not set them down. The tendons along her inner forearms stand visible under the skin. She's holding the chairs tighter than the chairs require. The group stops 15 feet from Lee. Maddox stands slightly forward of the arc, not by much, a half step, maybe less, but the separation is enough to establish that the semicircle belongs to him, and that what happens next flows from his decision. The sun has dropped low enough that the light arrives almost horizontal, pushing shadows long and thin across the packed dirt, turning the suspended dust into an amber veil that softens the edges of everything except the outlines of the men standing in it. "Hey!" The word crosses the distance without effort. Maddox's voice does not project so much as occupy. It fills the space it enters and does not dissipate at the edges. Lee turns. The rotation begins in his hips, transfers through his trunk, reaches his shoulders last. Vasquez catches this sequence from her angle at the doorframe. The rest of the men see a small civilian turning around. "You're the Kungfu guy?" Not inflected as a question. Maddox's chin is level, his weight settled evenly across both feet, his hands at his sides in a posture that mirrors parade rest without the formality. Lee looks at him, then at the arc of men behind him, then back at Maddox. His expression offers nothing, no recognition, no challenge, no reaction that the men can grab hold of and use as fuel. The blankness of it lands differently than hostility would. Hostility gives the observer something to push against. This gives them nothing, and the nothing irritates the group in a way that several of them can feel, but none of them could name. A specialist named Garner breaks the silence from the back of the arc. 6'1", a wide frame carrying an extra 15 pounds through the midsection that he has stopped trying to lose, a laugh that detonates ahead of most jokes like a pressure wave arriving before the sound. "Show us something, Hollywood." Laughter from the group, too loud for the space between them. The sound travels across the parade ground, reaches the barracks wall, returns as a thin echo that has lost something essential in the transit. The confidence, maybe, or the timing. The original laugh and its reflection do not match. Lee's canvas bag sits on the ground 12 feet to his left. He has not looked at it. He has not looked at the holstered pistol either, and Vasquez, still gripping the chairs, cannot determine whether this means he has failed to register the weapon or has registered it so completely that visual confirmation is unnecessary. The distinction between those two possibilities is the distance between carelessness and something else entirely. Maddox takes 2 steps forward. The gap compresses to roughly 8 feet. Every witness present will later identify what happens next as the true beginning, though none of them recognize it as such in the moment it occurs. He draws the pistol. The motion is slow, not the speed of a combat draw, not the trained snap from holster to target that the range instructors drill until the arm moves faster than the decision to move it. This is deliberate. He pulls the weapon free with his right hand, holds it at his side for a single beat, then brings the arm up and extends it until the barrel points directly at Lee's face. The slowness is the message. A fast draw is a threat. This is an invitation. Extended at a pace that gives the other man time to flinch, time to step back, time to reveal the gap between what he claims to be and what his nervous system actually believes when a barrel fills its field of vision. Lee does not flinch, does not shift his weight, does not blink in any way that is visible from Vasquez's angle or Torres's or Garner's. His eyes remain on Maddox's face, not on the weapon, as though the pistol is not the relevant variable in the exchange. Maddox holds the arm steady. The barrel sits 18 inches from the bridge of Lee's nose, close enough that Lee can see the dust that has settled into the serrations on the slide, a detail that will surface in accounts given weeks later with the particular clarity that attaches to things observed under threat. Maddox's left fist clenches at his side, a contraction he is likely not conscious of, the hand tightening in response to an arousal state that his face has not yet acknowledged. The smirk arrives half a second after the arm locks into position, as though his expression needs time to catch up with the commitment his body has already made. Try your fake kung fu. The semicircle erupts. Garner folds forward at the waist. 2 men clap, sharp, percussive, the sound of palms meeting in approval rather than rhythm. The laughter is genuine and sharp, the kind that comes from a group that believes the funniest part of the afternoon is already happening, and that everything from here will be epilogue. None of them are watching Lee's feet. Torres, standing at Maddox's 4 o'clock, sees something the others miss. Maddox's trigger finger is indexed along the frame, proper safety discipline, the weapon functioning as prop rather than instrument. But Torres also catches the moment, fast enough to be involuntary, when the finger drifts a 1/4 inch toward the trigger guard. Maddox corrects. The correction is faster than the drift, which means the conscious mind is still ahead of whatever impulse produced the movement. But the drift happened. Torres saw it happen, and the fact that it needed correcting at all tells him something about the distance between what Maddox is performing and what Maddox is feeling. Vasquez sets the chairs down, not because her arms are tired, because something in the geometry of Lee's stance has changed. Not the position of his feet, not the angle of his shoulders, but the distribution beneath all of it. The weight has moved. She cannot say where or how. The ground did not register the shift. But something that was balanced is now loaded, and the difference between those two states is the difference between standing and being ready to stand. The laughter thins but does not stop. Garner still grins wide enough to see from 30 feet. The sun drops another degree. The shadows reach further east. Lee's mouth moves. Vasquez is the only one at the right angle to catch it, and she will later say she remains uncertain whether he spoke or simply released a breath through parted lips. Whatever it is, it occupies less than a second of time and produces no audible sound at the distance the others are standing. Then 6 seconds begin. Lee's left hand comes up first, not toward the gun, toward the wrist behind it, Maddox's right wrist, the one bearing the weight of the M1911 and the full extension of a locked arm. The hand travels 14 inches rising from Lee's side, along a path that does not arc. Straight, with a slight inward curve at the terminal end, the way a current finds a bank without ever appearing to turn. Contact. The outer edge of Lee's left palm meets the inside of Maddox's wrist. Not a grab, not a strike, a lateral input, pressure applied perpendicular to the arm's line of force. Maddox's arm moves 2 inches to Lee's right. The barrel, which had been aimed at the center of Lee's face, now points past his left ear at empty air and fading light. 1 second. Maddox's grip does not loosen. His forearm engages, the flexors firing in sequence to drag the weapon back on target. The impulse is automatic, built from thousands of hours on firing ranges, where reacquisition of the sight picture is drilled, until the correction happens faster than the error that caused it. His wrist rotates inward, beginning the arc that will bring the barrel back to center. The rotation never completes. Lee's right hand arrives at a different address. Not the gun, not the arm. The soft triangle of tissue below Maddox's extended elbow, the cubital fossa, where the joint is most mechanically exposed, and the brachial artery sits close enough to the surface that a pulse is visible in the right light. 2 fingers and a thumb. The grip is specific enough that Torres, watching from 4 o'clock, can see individual tendons standing in relief on the back of Lee's hand, each one holding a separate line of communication with the joint it controls. Both inputs arrive inside the same quarter second. The left palm pushes the wrist further offline. The right hand folds Maddox's elbow inward against its own hinge, along the axis where the joint offers the least structural resistance. The physics of it could be diagrammed on a napkin. The execution could not. 2 seconds. The barrel points at the sky. Maddox's shoulder dips. Not a choice, a structural consequence. The elbow manipulation has rerouted the load path through his arm, and the shoulder girdle compensates by dropping to absorb force it was never positioned to receive. His center of gravity shifts forward and to the right. One boot moves to catch it. The heel strikes packed dirt and holds, but the correction originates at the ankle rather than the hip. Reactive, not governed. Lee steps. Left foot, placed inside Maddox's lead foot, the gap between their boots narrow enough that leather nearly touches leather. The angle is perpendicular to Maddox's stance line, a position that exists in the precise corridor where Maddox's balance is weakest, and his capacity to generate force approaches 0. There is a term for this in engineering. It is called the null point. Lee is standing in it. Something Vasquez will attempt to describe in a letter she writes 3 weeks from now and never sends. During the step, Lee's upper body does not move. The locomotion is entirely below the waist, hips, knees, the ball of the left foot pressing into dirt, while his torso and head and eyes remain fixed on the same horizontal plane as if mounted on a rail. Watching it is like watching someone rearrange the furniture around a piece of sculpture that has not been touched. 3 seconds. Lee's left hand releases. Maddox's arm, freed from lateral pressure, swings back toward center, a trained reflex completing the correction it began a full second ago. The barrel sweeps through the space where Lee's head had been. Lee is no longer in that space. He occupies Maddox's 2 o'clock now, inside the arc of the extended arm, standing at a distance too close for the firearm to track and too angled for the left fist to reach without a full rotation of the trunk. The pistol has not been taken. It has not been knocked away. It remains in Maddox's hand, finger still indexed along the frame, and it is useless. Not through disarmament, but through geometry. The weapon still functions. It simply has nowhere left to point. 4 seconds. Lee's right hand releases the elbow. Both of his hands are free. Both of Maddox's hands are occupied, one holding a pistol that has been rendered irrelevant, the other clenched in a fist that cannot find its target. The two men stand at contact distance, and inside the 4th second, a gap opens where nothing happens, a pause with weight to it. Something Torres cannot reconcile afterward, something that fits no training scenario he has encountered. 2 men within arm's reach, one of them armed, and the one without the weapon waiting. Then Lee places his right palm flat against Maddox's sternum. Open hand, fingers together, no chamber, no retraction. The arm does not pull back before it delivers. It is already in position when contact occurs, as though it has been resting there since before the exchange began and has only now made its presence known. The push. Maddox's boots leave the dirt. 3 inches of clearance, maybe 4, enough that the amber light passes under his soles for a fraction of a second before gravity collects him. His body travels backward along a line roughly 45 degrees off his original facing. 6 feet, maybe 7. The boots reconnect heels first, and the landing staggers him 2 additional steps before the architecture of his balance finds ground it trusts. The pistol lies on the dirt between them. Equidistant. Neither man moves toward it. 5 seconds. 6. The laughter has stopped. No one can identify the threshold, not the moment of first contact, not the push, not the landing. Somewhere in the middle, in the space between 1 second and the next, the sound left the parade ground and did not come back. Garner's mouth holds the shape of the laugh. The sound behind it has gone. Dust hangs where Maddox had been standing, drifting east in low wind, catching the last of the amber light. Lee stands at the center of the cleared space, right hand returned to his side. His left hand has not made a fist at any point during the 6 seconds, and it does not make one now. Nobody picks up the pistol for 11 seconds. The semicircle has lost its geometry. 2 of the men in plate carriers have stepped backward without registering the retreat. Their boot prints will show it later, 2 shallow depressions in the powder that sit behind the line where they were standing when the laughter was still real. Garner has closed his mouth and shifted to breathing through his nose, slow and deliberate, the rhythm of a man whose body is demanding oxygen for a process that has nothing to do with physical exertion. Something behind his eyes is being disassembled and rebuilt, and the work requires fuel. Maddox stands where his stagger delivered him. Feet shoulder-width apart, not a fighting stance, not at ease. A posture the body defaults to when the mind has stopped issuing commands and the skeletal system is left to govern itself. His right hand, the one that held the M1911 for 9 months of daily carry without once questioning what it meant to hold it, is open. The fingers curl partway inward, stop and return. Testing. The hand is conducting its own audit, checking whether the pathways between intention and action still run in the direction Maddox has always trusted them to run. Torres crosses the space and picks up the weapon. Chamber check. Safety engaged. He holds it at his side, with the barrel aimed at the ground, and does not offer it back. Maddox does not look at him, does not look at the pistol. His eyes remain fixed on Lee, but the quality behind them has migrated somewhere Torres has never seen on this man's face. A frequency Torres has no reference for, like hearing a familiar voice speak a language he did not know it possessed. Vasquez is the first person who moves with intention rather than reflex. She releases the chairs she set down at the briefing hall entrance and walks to a position roughly equidistant between Lee and the group, offset to the side rather than between them. Not a mediator's placement, an observer's. Close enough to hear speech at conversational volume. Her hands are in her pockets. The muscles along her jaw hold a tension she has not released since the pistol was drawn. She saw the wrist redirection. She studied the entry mechanics of something adjacent to it, in a studio with rubberized flooring, and an instructor who wore padded gloves and counted aloud during drills. What she witnessed on this field bears the same relationship to that classroom as an electrical storm bears to a diagram of a circuit. The principles overlap, the scale does not. The footwork, the simultaneous bilateral input to wrist and elbow. She had been taught that the elbow manipulation Lee executed requires a 2-count setup, a positional adjustment followed by the application of force. Lee performed it inside a motion that was already accomplishing something else. The technique did not have its own moment. It borrowed time from an adjacent action and completed itself in the margin. She has no vocabulary for this. 2 semesters did not build one. A corporal at the back of the group, a man whose name does not appear in any account given afterward, turns and walks toward the barracks. The pace is even. His arms swing naturally. Nothing about his departure reads as panic or embarrassment. He simply leaves, the way a person exits a room when the conversation has shifted to a subject they have decided is not for them. Maddox inhales. The sound of it carries. His chest expands, and the expansion functions as a kind of restart, pulling his awareness back into the dimensions of the parade ground, back into the late amber light and the settling dust, and the fact of his own body standing upright on ground he no longer occupies the same way. His posture shifts, not from readiness to defeat, not from strength to weakness, from locked stillness to something that looks at distance like the early stages of a machine recalibrating after receiving an input it was not designed to process. His right hand rises and rubs the inside of his wrist, the spot where Lee's palm made lateral contact. The motion is slow, exploratory, as if the skin at that point retained information that his conscious mind could still extract if he pressed carefully enough. Lee has not moved from center ground. His breathing remains invisible, no rise in the shoulders, no flare at the nostrils, no expansion of the chest that Vasquez can detect from her angle 12 feet away. She has been watching him directly for 30 seconds now and has not seen a single respiratory cycle complete itself in any visible way. The absence of it unsettles something in her that she will carry for months without resolution. Lee breaks the geometry first. He walks, not toward Maddox, not away from the group, toward Vasquez. The choice is specific enough that 2 soldiers in the remnant of the semicircle glance at each other. Lee stops 6 feet from her. Conversational distance, not close enough to crowd. You study. A statement. She cannot locate how he arrived at it. Wing Chun, 2 semesters. I'm not... Your weight was on your back foot the whole time you watched. Trained eyes pull backward first. The sentence disarmed something in her she did not know was armed. She had believed she was standing casually. The discovery that her body had been speaking a language someone could read, and that she had not been aware it was speaking, rearranges the ground she is standing on without moving her feet. That man, she says, and her head tilts toward Maddox. She stops, begins from a different entry point. He's been making this base small for everyone, especially me. Lee looks at Maddox. Across the field, Torres has moved closer to the sergeant and is saying something at a volume that does not carry. Maddox does not respond to whatever it is. His hand has stopped rubbing the wrist. It hangs at his side now, open, the fingers finally still. What did you do to his arm? Vasquez asks. Showed it where it already wanted to go. She waits for more. The silence between them operates on different terms than the silence between Lee and the soldiers, less charged, less spatial. 2 people standing near the same window, looking at the same scene, neither requiring the other to explain what they are seeing. People here think size is the conversation, she says. It's the only language this base speaks. Lee's expression shifts, not into a smile, not into sympathy, into recognition, the particular adjustment that occurs when a person encounters, in unfamiliar territory, a shape they have met before. Something Vasquez carries matches something Lee has observed in other rooms, under other kinds of pressure, behind other locked doors. Then today, they heard a different word. She will remember that sentence longer than anything else that happens on this parade ground. Not for its content, for the way he delivers it, the same flat register he might use to report a temperature reading or confirm a gate number, as though the reframing of her entire experience on this base is a matter of record, not interpretation. Across the field, Maddox has moved. He bends and retrieves his cover from the dirt where it landed brim down during the stagger, 3 feet behind his final position. He brushes the dust from it with 2 slow passes of his palm. places it on his head with both hands, adjusts the brim, tugs each side. The precision of this small sequence, the care of it, the familiar choreography of a gesture performed 10,000 times, is the first thing he has done since the 6 seconds began that resembles the Dale Maddox this base has known for 9 months. Torres watches him complete the adjustment and releases a breath that has been held long enough to leave a faint ache between his ribs. Maddox retires from the army in 1979. 9 years after Fort Ridley, 3 postings later, a combat tour that leaves him with a Purple Heart and a limp he declines to explain to anyone who was not there when he acquired it. He takes a job managing a freight depot outside El Paso and does not discuss his service with civilians. In 2001, a journalist researching Bruce Lee's military demonstrations locates Maddox through VA records. The interview takes place on the porch of a clapboard house with a view of a 2-lane road that carries maybe 10 vehicles an hour. Maddox sits in a plastic chair with a cup of coffee he never drinks from. A wasp lands on the rim of the cup halfway through and he does not brush it away. He speaks at a pace that suggests these sentences have been organized for 30 years, inside a room he could not find the door to until now. I've been hit by men who outweighed me, took a rifle butt across the jaw in Quang Tri and finished the patrol. Pain is something I understand. It follows rules. You receive it, you categorize it, you adjust. That's a system. I spent my whole career inside that system. His thumb works at a callus on his left palm. The knuckle that sits out of alignment catches light when his hand turns. What Lee did wasn't pain. My arm went where he sent it. My body went where he decided. And at no point, I've sat in this chair and gone over it 1,000 times. At no point did I feel force, not impact, not leverage, nothing I could file under one man pushing against another man. The journalist asks what he felt instead. Permission being revoked. He sets the coffee on the porch railing. The wasp leaves. My arm had permission to be where it was. My balance had permission to hold. He took the permission away. I didn't lose a fight. I was dismissed from a position I thought belonged to me. A truck passes on the road below, downshifting on the grade. Maddox watches it until the sound folds into the distance. I pointed a weapon at that man's face. I had 90 pounds on him. 7 men behind me. And in 6 seconds, none of it was currency. Not the gun, not the weight, not the numbers. The journalist asks whether the encounter changed how he trained soldiers in the years that followed. Maddox does not answer immediately. When the words come, his voice has dropped, not softer but lower, drawn from a register that costs something to access. I stopped teaching men to trust their size. That was the first thing. Took me 3 years to understand why, but I stopped. Because size is a loan. You carry it around thinking it belongs to you, and everybody treats you like it does, and then one afternoon on a dirt field a man half your weight shows you the interest rate. He picks up the coffee, returns it to the railing without drinking. I never told anyone the worst part. It wasn't the push, wasn't the weapon leaving my hand. The worst part was his breathing. I stood 5 feet from him when it was over. My pulse was in my throat, and he was breathing the same as when I first walked up. Like the 6 seconds cost him nothing, like I hadn't even registered as a transaction. The journalist closes his notebook, stands. The interview is over, but as the man reaches the bottom porch step, Maddox speaks once more, unprompted, directed at the road or the light or the 30 years between that parade ground and this chair. I spent my whole life believing control meant holding on harder. That man never held on to anything, and nothing moved without his permission.